Hi beautiful souls, it's Han here today with another video for you in our Saturn series. And today we're doing 5 tips for Saturn in the 9th house, in Sagittarius, or having Capricorn ruling the 9th house. So I have made a video talking about Saturn in the 9th house and the karmic cycles of this Saturn placement. I would highly recommend that you watch that video first so you can get a more comprehensive understanding of the Saturn placement. So links up above and description box below. So after you watch that, you can come back and check out this video. So the first tip that I have for Saturn in the 9th house, in Sagittarius or Capricorn ruling the 9th house, would be to get out of your comfort zone. Saturn in the 9th house, people, there is a way in which you might have grown up in a more sort of religious background, or a background wherein the people in your family, or maybe it's your father, who you felt sort of imposed certain belief systems onto you. So now you are needing to define your own truth about life and the way that you want to live your life. So one of the best ways to really figure out what you really believe in is to get out of your comfort zone. So it's like if you look at this cap for my cup, you can see there's and by the way, this is not, kind of got inspired by this idea from this website that I found online. And basically, you know, they talk about the fact that it's like this is your boundary. Yeah, this is the outline of this cup is like your boundary. And there's a space inside that's considered to be your comfort zone. And a lot of times we just stay there. We go around the comfort zone. And, but, you know, when we talk about getting out of your comfort zone, it means that we sort of go outside of that, but we're still within our limits and our boundaries, and we explore what's outside of our comfort zone. And in order to do this, you know, certain things that you can do is, for example, to travel or to live abroad. Because that's going to kind of get you to have a different type of environment around you. Learning a new language it can be very helpful, because when we adopt a new language into our brains, our mind kind of has to think differently, and it has sort of the way that the brain works to cope with new language expands the cognitive functions of the brain. So very interesting technique, as well as just learning any new cultural skills, like maybe cooking of dishes of a foreign culture, or learning a type of dance that is of a specific culture. Now, after you have done this, we're going to move on to the second tip that I have for this Saturn placement, which is to actually expand and push your own limits and boundaries. So, you know, first you're in the comfort zone, right? And then you kind of step out of that, but you're still within your boundary, and you explore that, and you can always come back to your comfort zone anytime you want. But now we're talking about sort of pushing beyond this boundary a little bit. So, you know, we don't want to do this in a way where we are stepping over other people's boundaries, but we want to know the reason why we are doing this. And therefore we give ourselves the permission to push beyond. So we come out of our boundaries a little bit now. We're out of the edge. We can always go back to the comfort zone anytime we want, but because we have pushed beyond this boundary here, what we end up doing is we actually end up with a bigger boundary. This is bigger than my the cap for my cup. Yeah, this is bigger. See? So we end up with a bigger boundary. So that means that our scope, the scope of our understanding of the world, of the way we see things, of our experience, is going to enlarge. We can push this further and make bigger space for ourselves. We can even push it more and enlarge it and make it bigger. And I think that is just really, really beautiful. But we can always come back to the comfort zone anytime we want. So a couple of things that you can consider doing to sort of push beyond your boundary is to actually maybe try to study different religion. And maybe for a period of your life, you try to, you know, follow that religion, participate in some of their rituals to see what that lifestyle is like. When it comes to lifestyle changes, this becomes a way of pushing our boundaries and getting out of the actual boundaries a little bit. Living by following another religion can really change your perspective and your views on the world. It doesn't mean that you have to follow it for the rest of your life. It doesn't even mean that you have to believe in it. It doesn't have to be your own truth, but you'll never know if it is or not if you never really practically explore it. Other lifestyle changes that you can really do to sort of push through your boundaries is maybe adopting a different diet, going vegan for a certain part of your life just to see what happens. Going on like a meditation retreat, going on a pilgrimage, that kind of change in lifestyle can really open up your perspective. And another way that you can really change your lifestyle completely is to consider your current job and your approach to your job. So if you've always been working within a company, can you do something else? Can you go freelance? That's a really big change right there that's going to change your world. Can you, maybe become a travel nomad and try to make money through that? Sexual exploration is really another great way to push those boundaries. The third tip that I have for Saturn in the 9th house, in Sagittarius or Capricorn ruling the 9th house, is to define your truth. And in order to define your truth, you must have done number 1 and number 2 first. Because one of the steps to defining your truth is to figure out how you dealt with struggle. Now, struggles in life, in crisis in life, is ruled by the 8th house, and what you make of those struggles is ruled by the 9th house. And so when we come out of the struggles of the 8th house, we take the skills there and we see if we can use those skills in everyday life by pushing our boundaries, by getting out of our comfort zone. And that skill that we adopt and we apply in these types of situations is what is our truth. So, for example, let's say that there's 2 people, right? And both of them want to work with childhood trauma. It's very much an 8th house thing. They want to work with their childhood trauma. One person does this by doing a lot of research and talking to different people. The other person does this by going inside of themselves and trying to work through it on their own and cultivating strength through that. And when these 2 people come out of the 8th house and they are now in the process of pushing their boundaries, let's say they decide to go vegan for a week. The first person maybe uses the skills of research, talking to different people, in order to come up with a proper diet for themselves. The second person, however, goes inside and listens to what is their body needs and then adopts a diet based on that. And they get through this process through the skills of strength. Whereas the other person got through this through the skills of adaptation and flexibility. So this means that, for the first person, their truth lies in, adopting a life or having a life that is based on flexibility, adaptability, research, really that kind of an attitude. Whereas the other person, their principle for living is based on intuition or strength. So this is an example of how this can happen, and that is the first step to defining your truth. Another thing that you can do is you can read up some quotes by famous people, famous philosophers, or spiritual gurus, and see which of those quotes really resonate with you by knowing how you feel when you read each of them. So if you're reading it and you're going 50-50, probably not your truth. If you're reading it and you're going, I can't believe how much that resonates with me, I definitely want to live my life like this, now you know which direction your truth is heading. And of course, the last thing that you can do to define your truth is to read up on different philosophies in the world. There's spiritual philosophies, like Taoism. There's more psychological philosophies like cognitive science, but there's also more political philosophies like liberalism. Which of these do you feel after having studied several of them and using your intuition, using your feeling, do you want to live by? Do you feel it has benefit for the society, has benefit for your life? The fourth tip that I have for Saturn in the 9th house, in Sagittarius or Capricorn Ruling the 9th house, is then to now start living by your truth. So there's actually a quote by Tao Te Ching that goes like this. Without going outside his door, one understands all that takes place under the sky. Without looking out from his window, one sees the Tao of heaven. The farther that one goes out from himself, the less he knows. Therefore, the sages got their knowledge without traveling, gave their right names to the things without seeing them, and accomplished their ends without any purpose of doing so. When you live your truth, it is that simple. It's as if you don't have to really do anything or even go outside of yourself, but just the being of who you are embodies the truth within your being already. The first thing that you're going to have to be able to do is, of course, to know yourself really well, like what you would have done in the last tip. Knowing what your values are, what principles you want to live by, understanding that, and knowing what morals and principles you want to go by in your life, and knowing that everybody is different. That you are different and you can have your own morals and principles, and that is perfectly okay. We're in the age of Aquarius now, guys. Anything goes, right? And the second thing is to be brave, to let go of fear. And sometimes being brave doesn't mean that you have to go going out and hiking a volcano. Sometimes being brave can mean just simply sitting there and being. The world really gets us to believe that we must do and do and do. So sometimes just simply being is much harder, and it requires a lot of courage and bravery. And remember not to judge. Don't judge yourself for wanting to live the life that you want, and don't judge other people for wanting to live the lives that they want, because they have their own morals and principles. And understanding that living your truth is actually the key to freedom. Freedom doesn't mean that you should be able to do whatever you want to do in your life, because sometimes we think, oh, we just want to do whatever we want to do, but there's an unconscious part of us that is doing those things because we want to prove something to someone, and that is not freedom, because we're going to be tied to a conditioning of our past and of our family and of the society. But if you can find your truth and live by that, you are no longer attached to needing to prove anything to anyone, needing to belong even, needing to fit in. That is real freedom. And the last tip that I have for Saturn in the 9th house, in Sagittarius or Capricorn Ruling the 9th house, is to teach something. You can teach yourself. Teaching yourself means learning more. You can teach something to other people. The best way to really know how to get started with regards to teaching something is to first get someone to teach something to you. Get a mentor. Then you can know how they're approaching teaching. You can adopt some of those techniques. The reason why it's kind of a good idea for Saturn in the 9th house to really teach something is because you get to make an impact, and you get to make an influence by spreading your truth. Truth is not meant to be kept for yourself, right? If you have found your truth, spreading that, opening up other people's perspectives the way that your perspective has opened up, there's a lot of value in that. And this can mean actual, in-person teaching, but it can also mean publishing something, like writing something and publishing it, or doing things online. So those are my 5 tips. And the books that I think is going to be really interesting there's a construction going on upstairs, so it's a bit noisy. So the first book that would be very useful for Saturn in the 9th house is to read any book by Reza Aslan. And the ones that I've read is No God But God. But I also heard that A Human History of Religion is also a really good book. Basically, if you can read this book by removing any preconceived notions or pre-existing biases while you are reading it, I think that you're really going to get somewhere with regards to opening up your perspective to different philosophies, religions, and belief systems. Another book, this is a more basic one, a more common and mainstream book, is The Story of Philosophy by Will Durant. So he sort of goes through, talks about different famous philosophers and sort of has an introduction to their wisdoms and teachings. Also, I really think that this book by a Turkish author called A Portrait of a Turkish Family, and the author is Irfan Orga. I absolutely love this book. He writes about his own, it's an autobiography. He writes about his own family and the way that he grows up in the 1900s in Turkey, during a time when the red fez was getting banned, when the country was going to be modernized. And he really goes into details about how his family deals with the war and the struggles. And it's a political struggle that affects, you know, him on a personal level. And it really opened up my eyes to one specific culture and how their own culture has to adapt and adjust. And so I actually think that any foreign books, it's going to be very, very interesting for Saturn in the 9th house. Movies for the Saturn placement is Samsara. This is a documentary where the makers travel around the world for 5 years, 25 different countries, and they film both like sort of landscape, but also rituals and customs around the world. And there's a preceding one, I think it's Baraka, so there's like 2 parts to it. So Baraka and Samsara. And I think that this is going to really generate a bit of a wanderlust, and it's going to really open up your eyes to a whole new world. And another movie that may really interest Saturn in the 9th house is 7 Years in Tibet, starring, of course, Brad Pitt. And this is a real story of Heinrich Harrer, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct, who is an Austrian mountaineer. He goes to Tibet, and he actually meets up with the Dalai Lama when the Dalai Lama was still really young. And I think that there's this is a beautiful story in itself, and it's a beautiful movie to illustrate a merging of culture and ideas. So yeah, there we have it, guys. My tips for Saturn in the 9th house, Saturn in Sagittarius or Capricorn ruling in the 9th house. If you have the Saturn placement and you've tried out some of these things, do comment below and let us know what your experiences have been. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. If you already subscribed, then thank you very much for coming along. I do birth chart readings, synastry, and relationship readings. All the information is on my website, so you can check that out. And I'll see you very soon, beautiful souls. Bye.